with us? Is that, or is that embedded? That's kind of essential to us. Our vision is to be able to look at the full breadth of a student's career.
Yeah, and they have to agree to share the data. So, so we have a data sharing agreement that you sign and everything else, but that doesn't by default allow your data to be shared with another district. We actually have another data sharing agreement that goes then between the districts, so that we would sign between Redwood City and Ravenswood and all your feeder districts. And we can do it like at an enterprise level where everybody agrees to do that.
And how's that going so far?
It goes well. We actually haven't had any issues with that. Like I was saying, we did it with Jefferson Union High School District. We do it with Campbell Union High School District in Santa Clara County. We've only had a couple districts that have been interested in doing that. And so, but we've seen no pushback. In fact, the elementary districts tend to really want to do it because it's a big load on them to provide the data as well. And I think that's what Diana was referring to. It's a lot of work for the high school districts to go out to every district and get it. And it's also a lot of work for the elementaries to put it together. I can tell you as a middle school principal, I used to put it together and send it off until I finally just gave it to the district and said, here's all the scripts to pull it out of Power School, and here's everything you need, and do it at the district level because we can't keep maintaining it at a school level.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. If you have any
Appreciate it.
further questions, just feel free to reach out to me. Just email me, or you can email Danya. We'll be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Carrie, I have one more question.
Okay, so now we are going to try to power through the rest of this agenda. We still have a lot of items. Oh, did Shanice have a question? Did you, Shanice? I don't think she does.
I did, but I can email them later. It's about college.
Shanice, do you have a question?
I did, but it's too late now. We can move on.
You're okay?
Mhm.
Sorry. Okay. 12.6, update on the bond program.
To the chair, we're on 12.5,
Fund balance.
the fund balance.
12.5. Then we'll go to 12.6.
Okay.
Okay, 12.5 is the fund balance and reserve requirement. So each year, tied back to since like 2014, Senate Bill 858 requires districts with anything over 3% of their reserve to make publicly aware. So that's what this item is doing. It's strictly an informational item. When we reported budget at the last meeting, we had a general fund balance of just over or just under 8.9. The minimum 3% reserve for economic uncertainties is around 6.5. So the difference of those two is just under 2.3. So that's what this item is. It's just strictly informational.
Any questions or comments? Okay, move to the next one.
Okay, so 12.6, we do have Makiko Soto with us from ESOM Advisors to provide an update on our bond program report. You have seen some of this information previously, but we did want to kind of share it with you in totality tonight. So we will start. Makiko, are you on?
I am. Thank you. Board President Dubois, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Williams, Cabinet, staff, and members of the community. Thank you so much for your time tonight. My name is Makiko Sato with ESOM Advisors, and I am here to provide the board with the annual program update in accordance with the district's debt policy. So this is a presentation booklet, but it has a lot of information. It's more of like a resource guide. So I'll try to present some of the highlights, but not every single data point in here because there's a lot of information in here. So starting on slide 3, district voters have approved 5 bond measures since 1996, totaling $633 million, with very strong support, as you can see in the table there. And moving on to slide 4, the district currently has $460.3 million in general obligation bonds outstanding. The district will make actually an additional 20 million, approximately 20 million in principal payment on July 1st. And so that will come down in a couple of weeks by 20 million. On slide 5, this is the annual debt service obligations associated with those outstanding bonds moving forward. The debt service amounts are fairly level, slightly escalating through about 2034, and then there's a pretty significant step down from there. I would like to note the bullet point on the bottom, the total net debt service associated with those outstanding bonds is approximately 596.6 million. And when you compare that total debt service compared to the principal amount that's outstanding, it means the repayment ratio of the program is 1.3 to 1, which is very low. The statutory limit currently is 4 to 1, so which means that the district's interest rates on the outstanding bonds is very low. All right, and then moving forward to the next section, this is about assessed value. And this is information that we covered during the last board meeting as well. But the district's tax base currently is 115.9 billion, which was a 5.12% increase over the prior year. And particularly since 2013, assessed valuation growth has been very robust in the district. And this is a key input for our bond model. So moving on to slide 8, one of the things that we'd like to keep an eye on is the statutory bonding capacity. Whenever the district issues additional bonds, we need to make sure that the total amount of bonds outstanding does not exceed 1.25% of the total assessed value. Based on the current assessed value and the amount of bonds currently outstanding, the net bonding capacity is a little shy of 1 billion. So plenty of bonding capacity from statutory bonding capacity perspective. So in terms of the tax rate, slide 10 shows the history of bond program tax rates for Sequoia Union High School District. And as you can see, between 2004 and about 2016, the tax rates associated with the bond program have generally gone up, which makes sense given the additional authorizations, the bond measures that have been approved by voters. The tax rate was highest in fiscal year 15-16 at $43.40 for $100,000 in assessed value. And really every year since then, the tax rate has come down. The current tax rate in fiscal year 21-22 is $29 for $100,000 in assessed value. And then moving forward, this graph shows the projection of the bond program tax rates moving forward. And we project with a continued assessed valuation growth of about 4% per year that the tax rates associated with the current bond program that the district has will steadily continue to decline. Another key thing that we keep an eye on is the district's bond ratings. The district currently has a AA1 bond rating from Moody's. And that is based on the deep entrenchment into the community funded status, the strong local economy, and high resident income levels. The district has a AA rating from Standard & Poor's, but the last bond issuance relied only on the Moody's rating. So that Standard & Poor's rating that's still the current rating, but their last report is fairly dated. So we didn't include that much information from that report. And then moving forward in terms of the market update, during the last presentation, I provided information on the Bond Buyer 20 Index. I switched it up a little bit this time, and I'm showing the MMD rates, the municipal market data rates, which is a benchmark yield curve that we look at in the municipal bond market. And as you've probably heard a lot in the news, interest rates have gone up significantly in 2022. And as you can see, there's a big uptick in that red line, the 10-year MMD rates for 2022, but we are coming off of an extraordinarily low interest rate environment. So even though interest rates are significantly higher than they were at the beginning of the year, we're still right about or slightly lower than the historical averages. So another thing that we keep an eye on is if there's any opportunities to refund or refinance any of the existing bonds. And despite the increasing interest rate environment, we were able to work with a private placement bank to lock in some low interest rates to refund the district's Series 2014 bonds, or a portion of those Series 2014 bonds. So these figures are actually from when we put together the presentation last week. And yesterday we were able to lock in the savings levels. So last week we were estimating gross savings of 6.2 million or so. And our final savings levels were 7.6 million, which is great. And in terms of the savings structure, we were able to pay off the principal for this Series 2014 bonds 1 year earlier. This is a very prudent approach. All right, and finally, new developments in compliance with post-issuance requirements. Admittedly, this is the least interesting section of this booklet. Very technical, but there was a big development in our world where the Attorney General issued an opinion regarding the cost of issuance. In the past, it's been a standard practice for decades for California school district bond issuances to pay for upfront cost of issuance from original issue premium. And that was done to preserve as much bond proceeds as possible for bond projects. The Attorney General recently issued an opinion indicating that he did not agree with that standard practice. And so the Attorney General was also very clear that nothing in the opinion implicates a school bond transaction completed more than 6 months ago. So this is just moving forward. It's something that we probably need to discuss if the district has any new money bond issuances to issue in the future. And then finally, there are a lot of post-issuance compliance requirements associated with being an issuer of municipal public bonds. The first one is the federal securities law. The district needs to provide ongoing information to investor, an annual report, and also with the occurrence of a material event. There are federal tax law requirements to spend down proceeds on appropriate projects within a certain time frame. And if the district does not do that, to make arbitrage rebate payments to the government. And finally, the state law. This is a relatively new requirement implemented in 2017 to submit an annual report to the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission. So we will work with the district to make sure that the district is compliant with all these ongoing responsibilities.
Thank you, Makiko.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. Shawnee's here.
I'll just comment, what an incredible increase in assessed value to districts since you three got on the board.
Okay. All right.
Know the quality of our schools contributes to the assessed value. Yeah, so I'll accept the compliment.
It also sounds like passing bonds would be an incredibly good investment for the community.
Would be a good investment.
Okay.
Crystal, I did have a question. You know, given that brief list of technicalities that we got there at the end, is there anything in there that represents anything more to us than just being aware of the latest right way to do it and making sure we dot our I's and cross our T's as we should?
As we should, correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. You staying up there for the
Yeah.
next item?
For a while.
So we will move along. So I don't think Shawnee's hand did not go up. So we'll go on to discussion item. Discussion of the draft resolution for a possible general obligation bond.
Yes, so as we, can we not, Josue, can we not share the screen quite yet? Thank you. So we can see our team here, which I do have joining us virtually. We have Janet Mueller, who you met last board meeting. We have Makiko again joining us for this item. And then we do have a new face, Jared Boygan, who is filling in for Joy, who is away. He is with TBWH B. I think they added this B over the years. And so tonight, as we journey closer and closer to August 3rd in hopes of passing the resolution, we wanted to get a draft resolution in front of the board for Janet to talk about some language and some process. Also, before I do turn it over to Janet and to the team for discussion, you know, at the last board meeting, there was starting to be some conversation about potentially looking at a number greater than the 14 per 100. And so in discussion with the team and then on staff's recommendation, if we were to think about wanting to go higher than the 14, I would ask that we do a quick tracking survey. We could test the number of 19. It's been 10 weeks since our last poll. The market has changed. This is a significantly higher number. We get the results back mid-July. And then also by that time, I would also be able to get from CAW Architects, who's doing the facility master planning, kind of a larger scale number on the themes that have come back from the facility master plan. So we can see how those two numbers potentially align. So that would be my recommendation. But Janet, let's go ahead and start, and I can bring up the draft resolution as well, or you can share your screen if you wish to do so.
Okay, thank you, Crystal, and good evening, everybody. Happy to be back with you tonight to kind of continue the conversation we started a couple of weeks ago. We were talking conceptually about sort of the process and what kind of language and what sort of the components of a bond measure that we'd have to pull together in order to call the election. And you know, what we had decided to do was to kind of create a draft that we could have some discussion around tonight, with the idea being that after we've had this discussion and maybe we're going to refine some things that are in the draft, including, of course, the financial parameters, which are, absent or blank right now from the draft, and then bring that all back to you on August 3rd. So you'll remember August 12th is the deadline for delivering the election order. So we will have some time after tonight, after we get some feedback from you all, if you have some to recraft and to reshape. And of course, if we want to go and talk about some of those higher tax rates and you want to, have that tracking poll completed, we'll obviously go through that exercise between now and then as well. So what you have with your packet, and hopefully you had a chance to review, is the bond ballot measure resolution. And the resolution is a resolution of 4.5 or 5 pages or so. And then we have included an exhibit that provides the ballot measure summary, which is sometimes we call the 75-word statement. Then we have the full ballot text. And if you remember, that would be exhibit B. That is what gets printed in the voter guide so that voters can have that information if they want to read all the detail. And finally, we also print something called the tax rate statement in the voter materials as well, that provides the public with an understanding of certain financial parameters related to the ultimate sizing and the tax rates and the total debt service that will be paid over the life of the bond issuance. So what I thought we might do, and we can do this however you want, and if we'd like to bring up the document and kind of click through it, we can, or I thought maybe I should talk through some high points, give everyone an opportunity for questions, and if you all feel like we want to sort of page through the document that way visually, we can certainly do that. So I'll kind of take your thoughts as to how you might like to, whether it would be helpful to have the document up or whether we just sort of talk through some of the main points.
I think it's a great question because it's hard to group edit a document like this. In my own case, I saw 4 things that I wanted to comment on. And so I thought for clarity, I would just hand out text to the board. I've got copies and I can paste, and I've shared it with superintendent and our CBO, and take a look at those, or I could handle them individually if you want to go through them singly. Pardon me? Papers? I will also, for Shanice and others, I'll post it to the chat.
I think you emailed me the information.
Think that one out. Oops. You know, something that I didn't save one for myself. So the first point is actually maybe not the most important to me, but seems symbolic. As I read through the resolutions for the successful bond offerings by Palo Alto, Berkeley, and Los Angeles, actually, and picked up some ideas for that. And some of them start with the first point there is, why not start with why we're in business or what our goals are, as opposed to kind of the legalese we're legally allowed to issue bonds. Yeah, yeah.
Rich,
two
are
of
you
the three did.
talking? I can't hear you.
It's symbolic more than anything else. Don't feel strongly about it, but I think it's nice.
I'm sorry, what did Rich say? I couldn't hear him.
Rich wondered.
I said I asked if others did that and he said 2 out of 3. And then I said I have no objection.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any
I-
other? I mean, is it okay just to go through serially on these things? Okay. Is it, if there, I thought if there's general agreement, this is going to come back to us.
Yeah.
You can incorporate and do whatever edits you see necessary. So the 5th clause does not include anything about air conditioning, ventilation, and air handling. And since you're talking about the infrastructure of plumbing and electricity, it seemed like a nice place to have that, where there's a great deal of sensitivity and interest in those issues. I see three head nods, I guess.
Yes.
Third point I make is in clause 8, that as is refers to updating computers. And some of us believe you should not spend bond money or capital money for operating expenditures, and computers fit into that category.
I agree with that.
If there's general agreement, others,
Say
there's
that,
one
can
other.
you say that again,
Okay.
Chris? Can you say that again?
So Shanice, the issue is whether computers, the bond's supposed to be for capital. Historically, it was totally fine to do computers with bond money, but it wasn't like every student had a computer back then. And Chris and I believe, and the others haven't said whether they believe or don't believe, that computers should be operating expenses and not bond expenses, because they're not really capital, they're more like textbooks now.
Yeah, they're more like textbooks, but do we, I think about like our technology going down earlier this year, like do we, so that would be facilities. Do you know what I'm talking about, Rich?
So
Like
Chris is
earlier this.
proposing information technology infrastructure be included.
Okay. Okay. And that could be facilities. That can be facilities then.
That would cover that. Yes, Shani.
Okay. Thank you.
And the final point I made concerns how we refer to the facilities master plan. And I thought this was really nice language, forgotten who it came from. I think it may have come from Berkeley, that talks about the process, gives you a little bit on the process. In the process, we consult with all these constituent groups, which you're doing. It also does not mention an actual number in there, which I think is tricky in any case, because if the number is larger than the bond amount, it's reasonable to ask, why are we not going for the full amount? If it's less, then you have no justification for the amount. And so this language just omits that. Do my colleagues generally agree with that? I think I see Ed nodding.
Those all seem like good comments to me, but I'd be interested if there's anything from the people who put the language together as reasons why they think that their proposals were better, or any comments from them I'd be interested to hear, but
As am I.
sound good to me, but I'd
Yep.
be interested to hear.
Yeah, and I'm happy to comment, and I did receive a copy of the comments ahead of time, so thank you for that. One of the important things about the resolution has a lot of sort of technical stuff that the registrar of voters needs, but these recitals that we would call them, those clauses, that really is your chance to say what you value and why you are calling this measure and what it means to you and what you want to focus on. So all of this information in the beginning is fully customizable so that it resonates, with how you think about what you're doing, and the wording that you provided is perfectly appropriate. I will just say one additional item is on this issue of the computers and the computer infrastructure, the network infrastructure. Computers can be financed with bonds. Some districts choose not to do it, some do. We can actually set up financings on a short-term basis so that the life of the bond doesn't exceed the life of the computer equipment, right? There's different techniques because we can't use long-term debt to finance short-life equipment. So there are techniques where we can, align those two things to make that more palatable. That said, we can just not do it at all. If we don't want to do it, it is actually in the bond project list a little bit later in the resolution. If we want to take like classroom devices, computers, iPads, and things of that nature out of the equation, we would want to strike it out from the bond project list as well, not just in the kind of the way the framing of the resolution. So we would filter that comment. If that is the board's desire, we would filter that throughout the whole project list.
Thank you for that. My own opinion is we should filter it out, that that kind of expenditure appropriately belongs in the operating budget. And if you put it in a multi-year bond, what do you do when it needs to be replaced? I also think if members of the public actually read through this and their knowledge about, most business practices would not allow those things to be long-term capitalized. So that's individual position is eliminated.
I would like, between now and August 3rd, the opportunity to discuss with Janet about concerns and deeper items on what actually qualifies as infrastructure versus just a singleton computer, and then we can bring back the recommendation if that's suitable for the board.
Can I mention?
That's fine.
The only other comment I had is not changing in the wording, but if you look at page 3, section 4, where down at the bottom where the board certifies that the district the A paragraph, the district has evaluated safety, class size reduction, and information technology needs. I think through our individual and subcommittee conversations, I think I've picked up on some of that, but want to suggest it might be useful if you gave the full board at the August 3rd meeting some sort of, or maybe in a newsletter, some kind of report on that. I for one don't know to what extent class size reduction is actually intended or needed. Am I being clear about this?
Go ahead.
Well, just on that point, unfortunately, it is a legal requirement that we make those findings. It is a component of Prop 39 when that legislation came to be. So it does actually trips districts up quite a bit.
Well, and so I'm not asking anything on the language change.
Right.
It seems reasonable. And I think our CBO has at least done some individual conversations on some of those items. And I'm suggesting that it be presented to us somehow between now and August 3rd.
I have a clarifying question for Janet. If we're supposed to find that it's for class, so is it in some way supposed to not be used for replacing really old classrooms with new ones, even if the class sizes are the same before and after, but the buildings are really old?
No, it's really hard to kind of interpret what the intent was behind the making of the finding, because there's no such restriction. I think it was just to get, for there to be some sense that the board had considered, there was 3 particular focuses, how to build classrooms to keep classes sizes smaller, I assume, and then the issues of security or safety and technology. They may not be as, the class size reduction issue may not be as pressing at this point, but it remains, unfortunately, in that finding requirement.
If it's agreeable, you would provide us with additional information,
Yes.
and the board concurs.
All right, is
That's
it
it.
then?
So I wanted to just briefly talk about an additional tracking poll and see how the board feels about that. And test $19.
I think it's a good idea for two reasons. One, if we're considering a different number than we polled, and it's 30% potentially higher than what we polled, that's seems meaningful. And also, economic conditions have changed, and we may get a sense of whether or not that impacts us. I guess I'm just wondering, is the process going to be that our next meeting is the meeting at which we're adopting this, that
I would
you'll be
share,
coming with the recommendation of a number and we'll pick it on that day, or is there some other process between today and that day?
I'll share the information in a board bulletin from the findings of the tracking survey, along with information from the facility master plan, so you have some time to think about it before August 3rd in the recommendation.
I think that the tracking poll is a great idea, and doing it at 19 seems appropriate. The incremental cost is nothing compared to the amount of money we have at risk there.
Thank you, Crystal, but I have a clarifying question for the board. Is it the board's desire to have a review of the need for class size reduction at this time?
Our understanding is that it's a requirement of the bond resolution that we certify that we've looked into it. Did I hear that right?
You've considered it in the developing the list of projects that you've developed, that you've considered that.
The board must represent that we've considered it. So our request was that we have information so that we can consider it.
Thompson, are you referring more to enrollment?
No, actually wasn't. I
Okay.
think you already have class size ratios for the district, and you've got the inventory of classes.
Yes.
And if you can give us some indication of what, not a demographic change, but what your expectations are, I think.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. That's what I was asking. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
shall I go ahead and keep
I do.
going? There are just maybe a couple of other points to bring everyone's attention to. So we have put together the 75-word summary, but of course it's missing a few key items, right? And we'll decide what those blanks will contain when we get through the tracking poll. This is mostly reflective of what was tested, the language that was tested. We may have made a few minor adjustments. Sometimes the exact wording used in the poll for one reason or another, just to make it a little bit more user-friendly when you're talking to people, might have been slightly different, but this is really mostly hitting on the wording, very closely on the wording that was tested. So it will, when it is completed with the tax rate and the total bond authorization amount, it should meet all the legal requirements and check the legal boxes for what has to be communicated in that 75 words. So it's an awkward mouthful, but I think this ballot question manages to contain all the important elements. So certainly if there's any feedback on that, we don't want to get too far afield what we poll. So we usually try to kind of get it just close enough that we feel confident that it will turn out to be close to what we polled. And then on Exhibit B, which is the full ballot text, the main item or the big item in there is the bond project list. That is a place to focus, I would say. The bond project list is section 3 of the full ballot text. And what it tries to do is, and I think we talked about this conceptually at the last meeting, we've come up with 3 categories of project types. And under each category, we've listed sort of bullet point refinements of what the components of projects would look like that fit within that category, that can be done at any or all of the district's sites and properties. And so the categories are, 1, to complete basic upgrades to meet student health, safety, and security standards. The second one is more focused on classrooms and learning spaces. It's to renovate, upgrade, and provide classrooms for science, math, engineering, arts and music instruction, and support 21st century learning. And then finally, the third category is improving access to modern instructional technology. So that kind of has its own category, and that's the place where I would draw your attention to if we want to strike out any references to devices and whatnot. That is the place where we would do it. So the idea is we've listed, it's a very robust, very broad project list, but yet I think your architect would say all of those things need to be done, and all of those at some level can or will be done, and depending on how much we have available to us may affect how much of all of those things get done and or in how many places those things get done. But the project list is organized to be comprehensive and to make sure we've hit on everything that really is needed and is part of the facilities master plan. That does not mean there won't be a facility or a project prioritization process, and that this will get refined and refined and refined over time as we go forward with the construction program. But that is the sort of the purpose behind the way that we have organized the project list. So I would say if you have things that you know of that are very important and or the community is talking about, we want to make sure that they're reflected in that bond project list. And so that would be another place to, I think, focus attention so that we think that we've hit it all when we get to August 3rd. And then just the final issue again is our final exhibit is the tax rate statement, and it's right now got some blanks until we decide what our bond authorization amount looks like.
Does the list include acquisition of property?
Let me see.
Acquisition of real estate?
It may not actually as a specific item. Other than as, like you've had to acquire an easement or something like that. If we think we're actually going to go out and buy land to construct something, we ought to call that out. We've tried to be broad in saying the projects can be done anywhere and or they could be done at, theoretically property that could be acquired, but we don't call out property acquisition as a specific project. So we ought to discuss whether we should have that on there.
It's come up as a discussion possibility for tied sports fields at times.
Yeah.
Without stating whether it would make the project list or not, or that debate,
Correct.
would we want the flexibility to include it by putting it in the text? Are you absolutely positive it won't make the cut list?
When thinking about the needs of Tide, I was looking at the current funding we have in our capital fund. And the funding that potentially is coming in from our most recent developer fee payment from Meta. But to increase the flexibility, we could add it to this language, yes. Yes.
I mean, do we need to start talking about priorities? If we're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like we're starting to get into priority discussion potentially.
I didn't mean to suggest that actually, but instead, do we want to give ourselves the flexibility by including it as a possible item there?
I would think so, just in case. Because I don't know how, I guess someone needs to answer for me. It would be difficult. If it's not in the language and something comes up, we don't have the flexibility.
What do we think would be the downside of including that? The upside is flexibility for a possibility we can foresee. Does that undermine the votability of the bond?
I mean, anytime, if we can, I'd have to look at the previous survey. I don't think we tested, I'd have to look at the previous poll to see if we tested anything about site acquisition. you know, with the last bond, we did purchase 2 properties. You know, we have the capacity at this time to purchase another property or so if needed. But the we'd have to weigh the flexibility out. I'd want to check the survey before I could give staff recommendation on that.
Could I
Crystal?
suggest this,
Chris-
that if it gets added, if the plan is to add it in text now, it's very easy to strike it August 3rd.
Sure.
And we could do that at the time when we're actually looking at, talking about priorities and things like that.
We can do that.
Yeah, Crystal, if I might,
Yes,
just
Jerry.
offer on the political question. I think it certainly makes a lot of sense to leave yourself the flexibility for minor, purchases that might, make sense down the road. These are long construction programs and you don't know what the future holds. I certainly wouldn't include it, in the ballot language or anything like that, because it's not a fundamental goal of this bond, right? It would be incidental to the main projects that you're trying to purchase. If there was like a adjacent property to something that you already owned, or that you needed to do something to complete an easement, or, some kind of public-private partnership, it's useful, I imagine, to have some of that flexibility. I think your concerns about, making it a central tenet, I wouldn't do that. But I think if there's a way that Janet, can include some language, in the full text of the resolution somewhere that gives you or future boards a little bit of flexibility without altering the ballot question itself, to me, that would be the best course of action here.
Quick question, just, my understanding is with the last bond, there was some property purchase that hasn't been used, and I don't know if that will be sensitive for any voters, or if not. If not, I don't know if Jared's aware of that nuance of the last bond, and maybe Jared, if that impacts your thinking at all on what you just said?
That in the last bond, you indicated you might acquire land and you have not yet, you mean?
No, land was purchased and has not been used.
Oh, and has not been used. I would say only if that is a particularly controversial issue in and of itself. I mean, I think, it's a fair question to raise, because school districts and land use can be tricky, and particularly on the peninsula where land is in high demand and it's expensive, and there's need for housing. There's lots of things people want to do with it. So, land use issues can become controversial really quickly. That is something to be aware of. I'm not personally aware of this being a particularly controversial issue. Maybe there is more history we should have on that. I don't read about you guys in the papers. I know when some of your colleagues in the peninsula have, bought land to build teacher housing, that's very public and people discuss it for a long time. Or, other colleagues of yours on the peninsula have struggled with where to site a new school or where to expand a middle school. That's, controversial for a time. I haven't, heard that about you. So my sense isn't that it's particularly controversial. And I think in terms of expectation management, it's fair for you to acquire land at a smart time for a potential future need, as long as you sort of manage people's expectations about what you're doing when you do it, not create a bunch of expectations around that. So, I don't think that it would automatically be, controversial or problematic to just add yourselves a little flexibility here for in case of future. And certainly I would say there doesn't seem to be any indication in the polling that says people don't think you've kept your promises before. They're very bullish on the potential of a new bond. There's nothing that comes up in the poll results that say, we don't trust how you've handled the old bonds. If anything, the poll seems to suggest, people feel good about the return on investment they've had from prior bonds. They think that schools are excellent. They think you provide a very top-notch education. They don't, seem particularly concerned about the idea of, levying a modest, tax for new bonds. So my sense is that it's not controversial, that you haven't before, and that, certainly something, minor that Janet might do to the full text language, would not be controversial now.
Thank you.
This is Shanice. Dr. Williams, do you have anything to say about the facilities piece of it? The questions that we've been asking, do you have a stance on
Bunnies, we can't
anything?
hear you.
Janice, we can't hear you.
Oh, can y'all hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, so Dr. Williams, do you have any stance or anything about the facilities being included in the bond or not?
We have been in conversation, Crystal and myself and team have been in conversation, but we will have a recommendation for you. As Crystal has indicated, once we do the survey, we will have information that we will update you in a weekly report.
Okay, thank
But
you.
at this time, to your question, we are still in conversation with team about my particular stance personally.
Okay.
So because it's getting late, we still have a lot to do. Are we pretty much ready to move on?
Feel pretty good about the
I
resolution?
think that the
Mhm.
flexibility probably outweighs the potential controversy. So I would, for what it's worth, side with Chris on that if it matters.
I hear you.
Agree with this, and
Okay.
just putting it in and we can pull it out if we want to.
Was that a Janet? We covered all of the high levels. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, team.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, so now we are moving on to our action items. We are not going to be doing presentations for some of these items because staff is out. And next item is 15.1, approval of the local accountability plan, which we have seen a few times.
To the chair, before it hits 10 o'clock, do you want to vote to extend the time to stick with board policy?
So do I have a motion to?
I move to
extend?
keep on going.
All right, second, all right. All in favor? All in favor? Yes.
All right.
Okay, so we are extending. Okay, so we are not going to do a presentation on the LCAP, but are there any questions or can you just go ahead and approve it? Okay, can I have a motion to approve
So moved.
Second,
and a second?
second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. 15.2, approval of local control accountability plan for EPAA. Any questions or comments?
I'll move to approve the LCAP.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Alan. Oh, sorry, was that Chris and Alan?
Yep.
Chris and Alan? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now am I going too fast? Am I
You're
okay?
doing great.
All right. Okay. All right, 15.3, adoption of proposed budget. Do we need any more information?
We'll review the budget last meeting, so I'm good to go.
Huh?
We had a full review of the budget last meeting, so
Okay.
I'm ready. I feel comfortable to approve. I move to approve.
I second.
Let Shani second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
By vote?
Anybody who stays up past 1 o'clock to be part of this gets extra voice.
Yeah. All right, 15.4. The resolution for trans, huh? You want me to go slower?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, any comments or questions? No? A motion, please?
You want it, Alan?
I move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call.
Trustee Thompson,
Yes.
trustee Stevenson,
Yes.
trustee Sarver,
Yes.
vice president Ginn,
Yes.
president Dubois.
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Moving on to 15.5, approval of the board candidate policy form for the next election. Any questions or comments? Is there a motion
I move approval.
and a second?
Second.
Is that, where did I hear that
Shanice.
second? Was that Shanice?
Oh,
Okay.
Shanice, I'm still here. I'm still here.
It's hard for you to second tonight. Okay. And all in favor? And that's 5-0.
Shawnee's votes for you to keep up a rapid pace. Doing great.
Yes. Okay.
I'm fading, I'm
15.6,
fading.
another resolution for the education protection account. Any comments or questions? A motion, please. Motion,
I move approval of item 15.6.
and a second.
Second,
Thank you, Shawnee's. So that's a roll call?
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
Trustee Stevenson,
yes.
trustee Sarver,
Yes,
Vice President Ginn,
Yes.
President Dubois,
Yes. See, we didn't need to extend the meeting possibly.
motion adopted.
No, I said, we might not have needed to extend the meeting. Okay, 15.7, yet another resolution. Budgetary increase and transfers at the year end. Any questions or comments? Motion, please.
I move adoption.
Second.
Roll call.
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
Trustee Stevenson,
Yes.
trustee Sarver,
Yes,
Vice President Ginn,
Yes.
President Dubois,
Yes.
motion adopted.
Thank you. 15.8, adoption of resolution 1730. Temporary interfund loan transfer at year end. Any questions or comments? Motion, please.
I move adoption.
A second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Chris.
Trustee
call.
Thompson,
Yes.
trustee Stevenson,
Yes.
I'm sorry, is this the resolution? Yes. Trustee Sarver,
Yes,
Vice President Ginn,
Yes.
President Dubois,
Yes,
motion adopted.
thank you. Now 15.9, this is an exciting one. Resolution recognizing June 19th as Juneteenth. This is exciting. Sorry to move so quickly through this. Any comments or questions?
I have a question. I asked the superintendent in advance. I'm wondering if we can put the language of the resolution up. The way I read it, it sounded like we were potentially removing a work day from everybody next academic year. At least that's the way it read to me. And so I just wanted to make sure it said that there's a paid day off. So I'm wondering if that means there's some other day that people work or if we've just shortened our work year by a day.
Actually, really good question. What happens there is really toward the classified staff, and it's still something that would have to be negotiated with them. There are various options that we could look at. And one of them specifically into that, it may not necessarily shorten their day. What it will add is their work year. What it would do is add another holiday. Right now, there's 16 paid holidays that they receive. It would add another one, so it'd be 17 paid holidays. So technically, their full year technically would be the same. However, there is an option for negotiate. Usually not a popular one if it goes this route, is to lessen the classified work year by a day, which means it affects their salary. So I don't see that as probably being a viable option. What we have going for this year, just because we're coming in this so late, we do have an MOU that we're finishing getting signatures with the classified union, in which those that are 11 or 12-month employees who would normally work on June 20th will get an additional day of leave toward like their sick leave they can use by June 30th of 2023. But moving on forward, what we would negotiate more likely would be toward the adding that as an additional holiday for them, another paid holiday. So it doesn't shorten their work year.
But I mean, one less day of work that's performed.
Correct, yes, but it still counts as, so if they say they're 260 day employees, they will still can be considered 260 days total. It's just as another holiday that would be added as part of that. So they would not work that day, it would just be a holiday, paid holiday.
But so by adopting this resolution, we're reducing by one the number of days that our employees will work for us each year.
Correct. For our classified, yes. It'd be a paid holiday. It's like we would do with let's say Christmas or
So they get paid
Thanksgiving,
for the
things like
same
that.
number of days of work, but they would work one less day.
Yes,
Forever.
like, yeah, it's like 4th of July, things like that, but it's correct. It would be that from along with what we would negotiate with AFSCME. But I can't give a lot of specific only because it's still negotiable. I don't want to negotiate away from the
I
table.
mean, I'm 100% supportive of people being able to celebrate that particular day. It seems as though we're reducing by 0.5% the amount of work that people perform. If they were roughly 200 days and we're taking away one, and that would be going on forever. So I just want to make sure that everyone, that we did that with thought.
If that was negotiated, I don't want to take too much of negotiating away from the table, but is an option if we negotiate for this upcoming school year. That is one of the options.
Be interested in my colleagues' thoughts, if any, on this.
I guess I am curious whether it binds your hands in the negotiation, whether this resolution binds your
No.
hands in the negotiating.
It does
Negotiation
not. I
process.
mean, we'd have to negotiate one way or the other. To be honest with you, we're way behind the 8 ball in terms of other districts that have negotiated this. Like I said, there's other options we can look at, but we're probably one of the very few districts that are out there that have not had addressed this with the classified unions.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Are you okay? We didn't answer your question, but your colleagues didn't answer your question.
Anybody else has anything to say?
Huh?
I'm open to hearing if anyone else has anything to say. Mr. Beal answered my questions, but if
Yeah.
my colleagues have anything to share, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I guess where I am, there's a lack of clarity for us on what's going on, which is a little difficult. But given the given the importance of this resolution and declaration, it outweighs any ambiguity or lack of understanding of how it's going to be negotiated and what the outcome is. Right.
No, I want to get this holiday recognized. And we will negotiate the appropriate MOU to go with it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's an uplifting holiday
Oh,
and-
that.
and I don't know, I think it helps our staff and our community to have one more day off.
I move approval of item 15.9.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And that's another roll call.
Trustee Thompson,
Yes.
trustee Stevenson,
Yes.
trustee Sarver,
Yes,
vice president Ginn,
Yes.
president Dubois,
Yes,
motion adopted.
thank you. All right, 15.10, approval of revised certificated management salary schedule for the new associate superintendent.
I have some comments on this one.
Okay. I wasn't going to ask for comments this time.
You weren't?
I wasn't going to.
Oh, I have some. First, I want to say I fully support the reassignment of Bonnie Hansen from assistant superposition to associate position. I believe that she should have exactly the same compensation with the same future raises as our one other associate super to avoid any new issues with compaction. Our compensation structure for people on salary schedules includes several potential additional numbers, such as a longevity amount. And I propose that, again, exactly match what's in place with one associate super with the other, so they both receive the same compensation and we don't create any new issues of compaction. I have a few reasons in specific to the salary schedule. Well, one, it was posted over the weekend and then we just got it by email 2 hours before the meeting. So I don't know that everybody's had full time to read it and really understand it. Having a salary schedule of people with positions above the assistant super reduces flexibility. If we need to hire an associate in the future and we've locked in this pay schedule, we've reduced the district's flexibility. And I think that's a strategic mistake for the district. Also, we know that we have issues with the existing salary schedules that are unaddressed. Shawnee's mentioned some of this during the equity audit discussion. It seems to me to be a mistake to be adding a new salary schedule to the list of salary schedules when we know that the existing salary schedules have issues and we don't need to do one in this situation. Finally, this particular salary schedule that's proposed, as I understand it, the proposal is to put the one person on it immediately at the top step. So I don't see how there's value in having the bottom 4 steps if the person's immediately going to the top step. So it seems to me that a strategic mistake to do it this way, and that we'd be better served by finding a way to exactly match, not having any new compaction, not creating any other issues potentially with our salary schedule. And a last comment, the date on this proposed salary schedule is July 1, 2021. And we know that there's an increase happening on July 1, 2022, which is in a few days. And then we know there's another increase happening on January 1, 2023. And I'd want to know at least that through that point in time, or through July 1 of 2024, that we're not creating any new compaction issues. And it's unclear to me with the information that I have that that's the case. So I think we should, again, I fully support Bonnie Hanson moving in position, but I don't support this approach with the salary schedule.
If you want me, I could try to address some of those concerns. I don't remember them all, so hopefully I'll address what I can on this one. One of them in terms of starting off at step 5 for the associate superintendent, Bonnie being into that. We do that with pretty much every other position out there. We have to look at years of service when someone starts in there. Because she's so far along, currently right now in terms of salary, this would fit right into where she would go by years of service in her salary at this time frame. So like I said, it's what we would do just in any other position, look at years of service and currently where they're at. We use the base for July 1, 2021. Because it's what we're currently in right now. So we're using that as our base for looking at our numbers. With the current position that we're hiring into, what the district is looking as doing what they call a Y rate. What that means is, and this will address some of the compaction issues, is that when these future raises coming up starting July 1st and then in January 1st, to avoid the compaction, a person would basically freeze their salary. They would not get the additional 2.5 or 2%. This is not the only position we have to look at Y rating. And when it comes down to either compaction or just overall different positions that were out there to ensure equity when movement took place over the number of years on different positions. So that'll address parts of that with compaction. When we looked at the changes between assistant superintendent and associate superintendent and how that would also look at percentages between the associate superintendent and superintendent, which again, some of the compaction issues, we did look at percentages between each one of those areas to ensure that they were pretty much equitable. There are, I think down the road, there will still be other compaction issues as we come up, but as we get through there, those are things we're going to have to address along the way. There's other things we may have to look at in terms of what they call, squaring the salary, which in itself is fairly expensive, but that also addresses some of those concerns as well. I'm not sure if I hit them all. I'm trying to remember some of the ones that were on there.
Is there a reason not to just have the 2 salaries be matched?
For the, well, one
The 2
is,
associate supers, just make them the same. And is there a reason not to do that?
you have 2 different areas. So you have your salaried schedule, what you see right now, and then you also have your contracted workers. Those will be 2 different because what we see on the salary schedule is set. When you go into contracts, say like with the associate superintendent / CBO or superintendent, that becomes quote unquote negotiable at that point. And there's different things that can be added, subtracted or whatnot within there. So doesn't necessarily mean that it's equity across the board when it comes down to salary increases, percentages. There could be car allowances, cell phone allowances, all sorts of stuff that could be in a contract that you wouldn't necessarily see within a salary position like you see on that salary schedule. So that's why there'd be so much of a difference between those 2 areas. And it's not necessarily could be comparable in terms of salary, only because a contracted position, there's a lot more leeway in what be put in or not put in the contracts.
Could you say with confidence that in the next 2 or 3 years that we will not have a compaction issue because of this salary schedule that you want us to approve?
I cannot.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Also, I just want to explain that The only thing with the salary schedule is the addition of the associate superintendent position. It is not a totally new salary schedule. So I just want to clarify that, because I thought I heard new salary schedule.
The associate superintendent salary schedule is new.
It's a new line.
Yeah.
Right, updated. So it's updated. So the salary schedule is not.
So Rich, you're,
There was no associate superintendent line on it before.
Right.
So
it's
that's what's new.
so Rich, you're still not comfortable with it?
It seems to me like we're highly likely for this exact salary schedule to produce a compaction issue in the next couple of years.
So I just want Todd to speak about the compaction issue, that without that, you're going to have a compaction issue.
Correct, and a lot of it really falls upon length of service with a certain individual, because what you tie in there is not just the education side of MA or master's or doctorate, but the big part comes down into the length of service. What we have in there, it's either by the number of years that they are in the district or the number of years that they're in management. When you have someone who's on the higher level, who's made it all the way to the end, and then they continue increasing their years of service, so it could be, 20 years, 15 years, whatever it is, they're going to continue going up. If you don't have that same flexibility in, say, a contracted position or other positions, that's when you're going to start seeing things level out. Because if you have someone's only here for, say, 2 years, 3 years, and this person's building up, going from 15, 20 years, because they're getting additional percentages, that's where you're going to start seeing that compaction actually grow.
Yeah, so you could have them have the exact same and not have the longevity thing be part of either. And then you don't have that problem.
But I would think that if this person is on a salary schedule, they are not a contracted position, they would be losing their years of service and other things that recognize them as a professional educator or something like that. Am I right, Todd?
I mean, but any which way, it's an increase in compensation.
It will be for that individual, yes, and that's where, I guess, on my 2 cents of this, been doing this such a long time within these positions, it's where you start looking at the contracted employees at that point. Because they were set on salary schedules, whether assistant superintendents, directors, principals, whatever, they're going to be set. But if there aren't changes in looking at what the contracted positions receive, and that's overall compensation is where that will come into play. If that doesn't get addressed, then you will always have that compaction issue.
So it seems to me that a big chunk of what's inherent in the salary schedule is the concepts of transparency and fairness and consistency. And a lot of the things that we were talking about in the equity survey earlier on this evening, and that the compaction issues are tied to some of the flexibility that the district would retain with contracts for those levels of employees, that is really where your compaction is going to occur. And it feels to me that as we are in the move of clarifying and specifying our job descriptions to try to get detail and fairness and transparency, that we would not want to be adding contracted positions anywhere that we could be adding positions on the salary schedule and doing more clarification and transparency. So those are the reasons why I've been really supporting that this should be something that is done on the salary schedule to put another piece squarely in place. I think the trade-offs of trying to maintain district flexibility in this case are less fair to our employee staff base.
Okay. Shanice, was your question answered?
Yes, it was. And I think Alan summed it up for me, kind of the way that I was feeling. or my perception.
It was answered, okay. Chris,
I'll ask a question of Todd. Do you get rid of the compaction problem if not only the salaried, but the contracted employees all have a length of service component to them?
Possibly. I know I'm sounding vague on that. Reason I'm just saying that, and I apologize if it sounds somewhat vague, just because it's whatever goes into that contract is where it comes really what the effect is. So it, like I said, there's a lot of different options you can put within that contract. There are opportunities too, if the board wants, is to put a kind of a quote unquote salary schedule into a contract, which includes, certain percentage increases along the way. So that way it also decreases, or sorry, it starts removing some of that issues with the compaction. So there really are a lot of options when it comes down to contracts of what you can do.
I think to me, what we're struggling with the issue of compaction is the fact that the nature of those agreements, salaried and the contract, are two different. And we know we've run into a problem in the past, and Rich anticipates that we may run into it again. We don't want to do that. I'm wondering how I'm not sure whether we can resolve that tonight, I guess is the worry. So I guess I'd ask Todd and the superintendent, what's the impact of pulling this? So there's a little more time. I know we have the subsequent hiring into the position.
And that's where the impact would be. Is if we pull this off, because the associate superintendent position is tied into this salary schedule, we would almost have to pull the appointment of that individual too, because now we don't have,
You don't have a pay rate.
we don't have a pay line that goes with it.
Do we not give fairly specific guidance about what the total comp should be? And then, so there's guidance to work something out to be officially approved at the next one, but you have very close clarity as to what we're seeking. And by the way, there's a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I had to step away for that second.
Asking if, let's just say there was agreement that our intent was that the two associate superintendents be compensated as closely as possible to each other with the same potential increases in the future, so that there is no additional compaction caused by either of them. That's the intent, and that you may have to work that out with the contract, but that's the board guidance. So I would think that no one would be concerned about taking the position or whatever with that feedback when we officially approve something come August. But that it would be known that that's the intent with the compensation.
With that though, there's some legal process that we would have to go through. It wouldn't be something we can do right away. When someone's contracted, especially at this time frame, because it's so late in the year, we really couldn't make any type of changes or moves if the board considers to go through this until by March 15th of this upcoming school year. Because there are certain rights that an individual has at this point if you're going to make such a major change from a contract to a salary schedule. So just my own 2 cents on this, it wouldn't be something we'd be able to fix either tonight or even the next board meeting, because there's a lot of processes, procedures we would have to implement along the way.
There's saying that between now and August 3rd, it couldn't be done.
What it sounds like what we would have to do in order to make some equity related to that is look at moving a contracted person to a salaried position. And the reason I say that is because in that contract, like I mentioned, you have the options to do so much in there that you can't give really onto a salaried position. Because you only have certain things that would be equitable across everybody on that salary schedule. I'm not sure if I made sense on that one, but.
Can I ask for one bit of clarification? I don't recall, and maybe I just don't remember the board actually gave directions that the two salaries should be this identical? Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay, just.
But
Would
as a board, we
you know
didn't
what
agree on
difference
that, right?
if we were to approve the salary schedule and then the salary schedule gets the raises that come on July 1, 2022, and then on January 1, 2023? Do you know how closely together our two associates would be compensated considering everything?
So instead of Y rating, the individual that's getting,
Or if you do the Y rating, then that means
if with the Y rating, it stays consistent at this point in terms of percentages that we'd be able to keep at this point. If we took away the Y rating, then the individuals who's on the salary schedule would, in essence, go above our current contracted employee for associate superintendent CBO. And again, it goes because of the longevity aspect.
So then what I hear, the intent is to do the Y rating.
Yes,
So for the coming year, the range will stay the same, you said, or
Correct.
no compaction, which would then give us time to one
Yeah.
year in which we can,
July 1st, 2023. So you have this school year coming up to look at it.
So it looks like we have public comment. Edith?
Thank you for that. I wanted to thank Trustee Ginn for bringing up the fact that the schedule was only added to the board agenda just prior to the meeting, which has been an ongoing frustration, getting worse over the last few meetings, that while the agenda is posted in accordance with the Brown Act, many of the ancillary and supporting documents are not, which make it very difficult for members of the public to be fully informed and participate in these meetings. This is one case in point where I would have had a lot of information I could have shared with trustees and questions I could have asked, like what is Y rating, to formulate my opinions ahead of time, had the schedule been available on Friday evening when the rest of the agenda was. I do also want to take this opportunity to point out that the administrative salary schedule, it confuses me why the board would be approving a salary schedule, the new line for July 1st, 2021 schedule, when no one will be in an associate superintendent position on the salary schedule in this year, because the next agenda item is to appoint someone as of July 1st of this year. So why isn't this schedule the new July 1st, 2022 schedule, so that that could have been considered in fact instead of in projection? And I will also take this opportunity to point out that the administrative salary schedule is still 2% beyond where it should be, because the former board made the decision to give administrators and non-represented classified members a 2% pay raise in exchange for a cap on their benefits, that the board then rescinded the cap on the benefits, but never took away the 2% pay raise. So in addition to this, administrators continue to be 2% beyond the certificated non-management staff of this district, and will, every time a change is made to the salary schedule, until that is rectified, which is a source of no small concern to our members. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as board president, what do I do with this discussion? What do I think? I think you bring up some good concerns, and I think I want to stand with you on this. I just don't want it to jeopardize Bonnie's appointment to her new position. So will that jeopardize it?
It sounds like it will.
Yes, it will.
It will.
I'm glad we had our audit, because these are the kinds of things that our HR, not Todd. I'm not saying
Denise,
you,
I'm having
Todd.
such a hard time hearing you.
I said, I'm not saying this to Todd, but I think these are some of the HR issues that we are dealing with. It has come out in our audit. And so, I feel what Edith is saying. And we can't solve it all the way tonight. I think it's unfair not to, can you hear me now? It's unfair not to acknowledge this person and their growth and their value in our organization, because we can't fix some of these things, sometimes not even a couple of months. And so I'm really struggling with this. I hear what Trustee Jen is saying. To be honest, this is kind of where we're at. I don't think it is black and white and simple as each person makes the same thing, when we know that if you are on a contract, it looks different than what it does on a salary. And I like the salary schedule because I think that's actually more transparent to me. I think people are willing to work within it. They're willing to understand it. They understand in which they're hired. People around them understand it. It's just so much more transparent. Although I understand the flexibility of not being on a contract, but I'm struggling with not honoring this person because of this schedule. So, but that's me.
Chris?
So I share Trustee Ginn's concern about the compaction issue and looking ahead and the structural problems that we have here. But I think the most interesting and the most difficult decisions for us as the Board of Trustees frequently don't have this clear right and wrong or win-win. And to me, this is one of them. And for me, the balance is going to go towards making the appointment of the new associate superintendent with the salary schedule we have before us, with the commitment. I hope we can hear from the superintendent to help us address the compaction issue and the problems of having contract and salaried employees at the top. This would then give us some time to address that while the compaction is not an immediate concern because of the Y rating.
Just to point out, and part of the reason why I have this problem is we didn't get the salary schedule to 2 hours before the meeting, didn't even know it was happening until very recently. And the first time, so we haven't had time to even dig into this. And so that's part
Actually,
of the frustration. At least I didn't.
So I was unable to check email for the 2 hours before the board meeting. I thought I had this Friday of last week, or maybe I was part of the agenda setting. Is it possible we got it there? Can you tell us when we got this document?
Yeah, originally this was placed on the second agenda item. Revisions had to be made. Realistically, there are more, I guess, optic ones to make it a little bit clearer to understand, but the numbers themselves stayed the same. Nothing changed between what was under what would be considered the next agenda items, where that's what's placed originally, and it should have been placed on the one we're talking about right now, but the numbers never changed. It was the same lines.
But I called on Monday and it wasn't up on Monday, right? It wasn't up.
It was initially posted on Friday, and then it was posted with the second item 1511. And so then some revisions and updates were made, and then it was reposted.
But there's a long period where nothing was posted. Is that right?
It's a long period relative.
On Monday and Tuesday, it wasn't posted.
Yeah, I guess I hope the superintendent is hearing that it is a struggle for SDTA, but also the board to receive documents late. And we also talked at the retreat about maybe putting a schedule on when we provide comments. And that would then have to be tied to getting the documents to us, earlier. So That's a general governance issue. But to restate where I am, in this messy position, I would like to see us move ahead with the salary schedule because it enables us to make the appointment of the new associate soup.
We just put a number on the instead of linking it to step 5, just put a number on that. Approve it with a number and not link to a salary schedule because there's a box, and just say this dollar amount. Is that legal?
We won't have a justification necessarily for that. If we were going to just put I hate to say this, but kind of a random number, this is what we're putting on there. When we put the salary schedule together, we can actually explain how each number was provided and where we got the information from and how they were calculated. If we were said just to put a number on there, there's hard to put a reasoning why this doesn't match here, why that doesn't match there. The other part of it too is if we just put a number, we don't have a scale on what goes where. Because if we say this is just say, I'll just put step 5 and we just use that number only. That means that person, that position only has one number that we can use. And just kind of, for example, say the individual who will be on the position decides to resign next week. I'm just going totally hypothetical. Then we'd have to post that position with that single number and single number only because we don't have anything else to use.
Or you post the assistant superintendent of ed services, which has a schedule.
Oh, they have that line. So
There is
it
an assist-
depends.
Yeah, so if this individual were to leave the next week, you could post for an assistant position that has a schedule.
You could, I mean, and that's where I think comes to that part where, while there's the board side of things, there's also the side where the recommendations would come in from, the superintendent or cabinet and what that would look like. And really is looking at the functions and necessary, what we would need for the position in the district itself.
But so I guess what I'm saying is, could we just approve the exact number that it is, the number you currently have in level 5, just say it's that number, approve it, and then work on these details over the coming year so that a year from now we can fix whatever needs to be fixed, which is the next time the Y rating number would have changed anyway. So she has a contract, she has a, whatever this is, that an appointment, it has a number on it, it's the same number. And then we have a year to figure out how to make sure that we don't create any new problems with this.
Well, but I advise against it. The other part of this is what we're then looking at is now more of a contract instead of a salary schedule. The purpose of a schedule is to show the different ranges.
It seems to me that we are embarked on an effort to an audit leading to a rationalization, an alignment of salary schedules and structures throughout our organization that we expect to be over a period of time in excess of a year, probably measured in some years, to really get it completely straightened out, and that the objectives are transparency and fairness. It seems to me that if we are creating a new position and the choice is putting it on the salary schedule or putting it into a contract position, that we are more in alignment with that large structural organizational effort by putting it on the salary schedule than by putting it in a contract. And that if this alignment process over the coming years has the potential for resulting in some adjustment to this new position along with others, I would rather see that position start on the salary schedule with transparency and fairness built into it, so that the position is transparent and fair, rather than a special arrangement for an individual who happens to be in the position initially. And I would rather take on the risk that we will want to make an adjustment over time to a salary scheduled position than to a contracted position where we did not need to create a contracted position. That is my fundamental sense.
Just a note, some of the late postings could be staff members were out ill. We've had a COVID spike in the district office. So,
And I would just like to say, I really appreciate you making that comment, Madam President, as we do realize, and I won't say late, but the time that documents were provided, staff had done as much as they can to do things in a timely fashion. And we had a high rate of folk who were out ill, still trying to work and meet deadlines. And I do want to acknowledge Mr. Bill, who is just returning, and also who has been working and doing the research around this. This is not something that has not been strategized and also reviewed. It has been research reviewed and compared to other districts. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then also, when we talk about just the mental wellness of all of our staff members, I just want to underscore that means for our district office staff members too, as they too are impacted by the pandemic. And most recently, we had a large group of our staff members who have been out due to that. So I understand and I appreciate the feedback and recommendations, but I also want to honor the folk who have been doing work and doing their best to work while also pressing through and taking care of their physical health. Thank you.
but Rich, this is a big concern to you, so I hate for you to be alone on this. So, and it's late and
happened
I'm now
before.
confused.
It's happened before.
Well,
I'm just saying,
I
I
may
don't want to be
stand
carried
with
like
you
there's
on
some
this.
compaction issue because of this, that we now need to do something else because this position created compaction, and in 2 or 3 years, we're gonna hear, oh, now we've got this problem, and
Yeah.
it's because of this very decision that we haven't, and that's what I would like to avoid.
I just think sometimes when a board member is really, really concerned, they're, it's worth pausing and, yes.
I just want to clarify and thank you, Trustee Gant. The compaction issue was created long before this team here. And so this is not, as you mentioned, an understanding that later we will not have a compaction issue, because we will have. We've had a compaction issue in this district, and it's just now being addressed, and that's not something that's going to go away overnight. And so we have brought that information to the trustees' attention. And so it is not as a result of adding this position that is going to continue the compaction issue, because the compaction issue is going to continue regardless to whether you add this position to this salary schedule or not. It's going to continue because it has not been completely dealt with. So I just want that on the record.
Are we ready for a motion? And we'll see how the vote lands. Motion? Okay,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor? I don't know whether do you know or abstain. Doesn't matter. I just feel I'm confused now. Okay, all against?
I do want to say for the,
So the vote was-
I do want to say for our
Me too.
record, I do want to say for our records, our HR really needs to be worked on. Like, there's job descriptions, there's all these things. In addition to what Edith has shared, it is an issue, which is why we separated out this role. And I'm so sad that there needs to be tension around things that haven't been dealt with for years. So I just needed to say my comment.
I'm gonna have somebody repeat that back.
Trustee Stevenson, we did not hear you, so I'll attempt to
gonna
repeat and repeat, not interpret, repeat what you've said, that we do have HR issues and that you're glad that we're able to deal with some of these issues. And it's unfortunate that we have to have tension around HR issues that have been created or have existed for years. Did I miss?
She said.
I don't want to misrepresent your comments.
Yes, that's what I said.
Madam President, I guess I'd like to add to that. I'm glad you said these are problems that have been there for years. They're problems that were highlighted in the equity study. And I've been very impressed with the staff with a relatively new director or head of HR and his work in moving these things forward and cleaning up the past. So I want to make sure we remember that.
Thank you for your comments. I just appreciate that you all took time with that. You know, I think that when one person does have a concern, I appreciate how everybody really listened and talked that through. So to me, that's a sign of a good board. Thank you. Okay, so now we are at 15.11. So the reassignment of the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services to the Associate Superintendent of Educational Services position. Do I have a
I'd
motion?
like to move approval of this one.
And is there a second? Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
And that is 5-0. And then we pulled 15.12, right? That's not quite ready yet. And we are done. Anybody want to make comments? Or is everybody too tired? We probably need to get everybody home.
Yeah.
Anybody have to make comment?
Happy summer.
Pardon me?
Happy summer.
Happy summer. Okay. Anybody need to say anything? Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn
Move to
I-
adjourn.
and a second?
Second.
All in
Second.
favor?
Third.
And meeting is adjourned.
Thank
And
you.
I'm glad we saved you from having